Have you ever experienced the unsettling sensation that you're navigating through existence, following someone else's blueprint, as though you're performing in a play scripted by external forces, parents, educators, peers, cultural norms, while something profound within your core protests that this narrative isn't truly yours? Each morning, you don the familiar disguise, fulfill your responsibilities, and engage with others pretending everything is harmonious. Yet when solitude finally embraces you, that disquieting inquiry emerges. Who am I beneath these layers of expectation? The ancient philosopher Confucius suggested that this profound sense of alienation isn't coincidental, but rather indicates a fundamental issue that most individuals lack the valor to confront. The majority traverse their entire existence without ever encountering their authentic selves, constraining themselves to enacted social functions, constructed identities, and externally imposed aspirations. Most devastating of all, they accept this limited experience as the totality of what life offers, departing this world without having connected with their innermost essence. Now consider this pivotal question: might this be happening in your own life? What you identify as self might not actually represent your true nature, your character traits, aspirations, and convictions. How much of this tapestry is genuinely yours, and how much was interwoven by others? Since our earliest years, we've been programmed to assimilate, to become acceptable versions of ourselves, concealing certain dimensions of our being to secure affection and acceptance. We fabricate a facade, what psychological pioneer Carl Jung termed a persona, a social veneer utilized for self-protection. Yet the longer we maintain this disguise, the further we drift from our authentic essence, until eventually this fabricated exterior becomes all that remains of our original self. Jung cautioned that existing disconnected from our genuine identity exacts a significant toll, one paid through emotional distress, profound dissatisfaction, and a persistent sensation that something vital remains beyond our grasp. Have you ever felt that regardless of your accomplishments, an inexplicable emptiness persists, as though something essential continuously eludes you? This occurs because what you genuinely require isn't external. It's not found in career advancement, ideal relationships, or validation from others. It resides within, buried beneath accumulated layers of societal conditioning. The fundamental question becomes, are you prepared to venture into the depths of your psyche and uncover your authentic self? This expedition isn't straightforward. Discovering your true identity necessitates confronting everything that has been suppressed, forgotten, or distorted throughout your years. It requires introspection and facing aspects of yourself you might prefer to avoid. Yet this represents the only pathway to liberation. In this exploration, we'll examine the transformative journey that Jung described as individuation, the process of becoming whole, integrating all facets of your being, and ultimately living in alignment with your essential nature. Are you prepared to embark on this profound odyssey of self-discovery? Then let us commence this transformative exploration together. From your earliest developmental stages, you absorbed the lesson that acceptance required conforming to specific behavioral patterns. Perhaps you were instructed to maintain politeness, moderate your vocal expression, suppress anger, or prioritize others' contentment. Alternatively, you might have internalized the necessity to project perpetual strength, conceal vulnerabilities, and exude confidence even when internally overwhelmed with uncertainty. Without conscious awareness, you began crafting an identity that wasn't exclusively yours, but rather a reflection of societal expectations. Jung designated this fabricated exterior as the persona, the facade presented to the external world, the version of yourself constructed to facilitate social integration. Don't be misled. We all possess this psychological mechanism. If you've ever behaved differently in professional settings versus domestic environments, among friends compared to family, or even curated a distinct online presence, you've already witnessed the persona's influence in your existence. Does it serve a function? Certainly. Without this psychological construct, navigating social interactions would prove challenging. However, substantial danger arises when you completely assimilate this artificial exterior. You gradually lose connection with your authentic identity. Reflect momentarily on how frequently you've expressed or enacted something solely to gain acceptance. How many times have you concealed your genuine thoughts out of apprehension about judgment? How often have you presented a smiling countenance while internally experiencing emotional turbulence? This pattern emerges because, at some juncture, the persona transcended being merely a temporary social role and began dominating your existence. You ceased being an authentic individual and transformed into a character enacting a script you never consciously selected. Herein lies the fundamental dilemma. The persona cannot nourish your spiritual essence. It might secure acceptance but not profound contentment. It guarantees superficial validation but not genuine happiness. Over extended periods, existing primarily through the persona culminates in an unfulfilling existence, characterized by the inexplicable absence of something fundamental, something you struggle to identify. More problematically, the more tenaciously you cling to this artificial facade, the further you drift from your essential nature. Yet if the persona doesn't constitute your authentic self, then who are you genuinely? To address this inquiry, we must examine the complementary aspect, the dimension of yourself that has been repressed and relegated to unconscious territories. Jung identified this as the shadow, and it represents the starting point of the genuine quest for self-discovery. However, proceed with caution, as confronting what lurks within the shadow often proves challenging. Are you prepared to venture further into this territory of self-exploration? Continue this journey with me as we delve deeper into the concealed aspects of your psychological landscape. If this exploration resonates with your experience, consider engaging more deeply with these ideas through continued reading. Your commitment to self-understanding represents an invaluable investment in your psychological well-being. If the persona represents the mask worn for social acceptance, then the shadow encompasses everything concealed to avoid rejection. Consider this crucial insight. What you suppress doesn't vanish. Conversely, it accumulates potency within your unconscious realm, operating in the obscured recesses of your mind, influencing your emotional responses, anxieties, and even life decisions without your conscious recognition. Carl Jung characterized the shadow as the veiled dimension of the psyche, comprising everything repressed throughout one's existence. Prohibited desires, contained rage, unacknowledged weaknesses, buried traumas. Perhaps most unsettling is that numerous elements residing in your shadow aren't inherently negative. They're simply aspects of yourself that someone once labeled inappropriate or unacceptable. As a child, perhaps your natural curiosity was deemed disruptive, teaching you to remain silent. Maybe you experienced justifiable anger, but were conditioned to believe expressing it was improper, causing you to internalize frustrations until they inevitably erupted. Perhaps your emotional sensitivity was mischaracterized as weakness by societal standards, compelling you to conceal your authentic feelings. All these dimensions of yourself that encountered rejection didn't disappear. They merely retreated, into your shadow, awaiting an opportunity to resurface, and emerge they do. If you've ever experienced uncharacteristic outbursts of anger followed by remorse, felt undisclosed envy toward others, or reacted disproportionately to criticism without comprehending why, you've witnessed your shadow temporarily seizing control. When we neglect conscious engagement with this psychological force, it manifests in distorted patterns, undermining our relationships, professional endeavors, and fundamental self-regard. Yet here lies a profound truth rarely acknowledged. Your shadow isn't your adversary. Counterintuitively, it harbors many of your personality's most valuable attributes: your creative potential, authentic expression, and genuine resilience. You cannot achieve psychological wholeness without integrating this essential component of yourself, requiring you to cease avoidance and commence introspection. But how does one confront something repressed for extended periods? How do you illuminate your shadow without allowing it to overwhelm your conscious self? The answer resides in a fundamental concept of Jungian psychology, the authentic self, which we'll explore extensively in the following section. The human psyche extends far beyond what we consciously perceive and understand. The majority of our psychological processes operate at profound, imperceptible levels. Jung proposed that discovering the authentic self requires more than examining our rational thoughts and daily decisions. We must venture into the unconscious depths where hidden patterns shaping our identity reside. What exactly populates this unconscious realm beyond your shadow, beyond repressed memories and unacknowledged desires? Something even more fundamental exists: archetypes. Jung discovered that the human psyche isn't a blank slate. Conversely, we're born with universal mental structures, patterns of thought, behavior, and emotion shared across humanity regardless of cultural context or historical period. He termed this the collective unconscious, from which archetypes emerge. Primordial images influencing our perception of ourselves and our world. If you've ever experienced inexplicable attraction to particular narratives, mythologies, or symbolic representations, it's because archetypes operate within your psychological landscape. They appear in folklore, cinematic expression, religious traditions, and most significantly, in your dreams and behaviors. Consider the hero archetype, present across virtually all cultures, representing one who confronts challenges, overcomes obstacles, and pursues transformation. Equally universal are the sage, embodying wisdom and introspection, the rebel, challenging established systems and questioning authority, and the caregiver, devoted to nurturing and serving others. Fascinatingly, you don't consciously select which archetypes influence your existence. They operate within you automatically, beyond conscious awareness. Problems arise when you identify exclusively with a single archetype while neglecting others. If you perceive yourself solely as the hero, you might feel compelled to demonstrate perpetual strength, unable to acknowledge personal vulnerabilities. If your identity centers exclusively on the caregiver role, you risk dedicating your entire existence to others' needs while neglecting self-care. Discovering your authentic self requires balancing these archetypal influences, recognizing which ones dominate your psychological landscape and integrating those you've disregarded. But how do these archetypes manifest in daily life? They emerge through dreams, impulses, and recurring patterns that appear without rational explanation. Ignoring them means disregarding essential components of your identity. Here emerges the critical question. If you remain unconscious of these archetypes, they control your destiny, determining your behavioral patterns, insecurities, and relationships. However, by recognizing and integrating them, you reclaim authorship of your personal narrative. This precisely distinguishes those who discover their authentic selves from individuals trapped in automated psychological patterns throughout their lives. What consequences await someone who disregards these psychological realities? Someone who rejects introspection, resists individuation, and persists in living according to artificial facades and illusions. The answer manifests in the psychological suffering that inevitably accompanies those fleeing from authentic self-knowledge. What happens when an individual spends their existence avoiding self-confrontation, ignoring their shadow, remaining imprisoned within their persona, and refusing to acknowledge the archetypes shaping their psychological trajectory? Jung articulated clearly that evading the individuation process doesn't preserve psychological safety. Instead, it condemns us to a fragmented existence saturated with anxiety, frustration, and an emptiness no external achievement can adequately fill. Many believe that adhering to societal expectations and conforming to established norms guarantees psychological tranquility. However, this serenity remains superficial. Eventually, something begins to deteriorate. This might manifest as inexplicable emotional crises, persistent dissatisfaction despite apparent success, or the emergence of psychosomatic conditions. Both mind and body inevitably signal when we've strayed significantly from our authentic nature. Non-individuation commonly manifests through destructive behavioral patterns. Have you observed how certain individuals perpetually repeat identical mistakes throughout their lives? How they repeatedly enter dysfunctional relationships, undermine their achievements, or exist in perpetual dissatisfaction? This occurs because, when we neglect our unconscious contents, we become captives of our own psychological blind spots. The unconscious invariably finds expression, even through suffering if necessary. Another prevalent symptom of non-individuation is the sensation of merely existing rather than genuinely living, manifesting through monotonous routines, purposeless activities, and a pervasive feeling of passively drifting without clear direction. Millions experience this reality, never questioning whether their current path represents authentic choice or merely conditioned response. They follow inherited patterns, imposed beliefs, and external expectations without examining whether these truly generate fulfillment. Perhaps most dangerous is the development of resentment. When individuals ignore their authentic nature, they inevitably experience anger without recognizing its source. They might project this outward, blaming societal structures, family dynamics, or cultural conditions for their suffering. Alternatively, this energy might turn inward, transforming into depression, self-sabotage, and profound disconnection from existence itself. Yet liberation remains possible. A pathway exists to break this cycle and escape this invisible psychological prison. The answer lies in summoning the courage to confront reality, question personal illusions, and embark upon individuation. This process demands strength, determination, and willingness to practice introspection even when discoveries prove uncomfortable. Now, we approach the crucial inquiry. What does authentic self-expression practically entail? How does one live without masks, without repression, without fear of external judgment? What transformation occurs when you genuinely connect with your essential nature? Discovering your authentic self represents not a destination, but an ongoing, process, not a sudden awakening, but a lifelong journey of discovery, deconstruction, and reconstruction. It requires confronting shadows and liberating yourself from imposed facades, a path few choose to traverse. Most prefer the security of conformity, clinging to their personas, believing rejection awaits without them, avoiding shadow work, fearing what lurks within, and ignoring archetypal influences to maintain illusions of complete self-determination. This avoidance exacts a devastating price, an empty existence lacking authenticity, depth, and genuine meaning. Jung demonstrated that true freedom lies not in conformity, but in becoming one's authentic self. This requires accepting your complete being, both strengths and limitations, both illuminated and shadowed aspects. It means claiming authorship over your existence, rather than remaining a product of environmental conditioning, cultural programming, and others' expectations. It means abandoning the role of passive spectator and becoming the conscious creator of your personal narrative. This pathway demands courage to relinquish comfortable illusions maintained for years, courage to confront personal fears and insecurities, courage to accept that your current self-concept might be fundamentally flawed. And that realization brings liberation, because now opportunity presents itself to become someone vastly more authentic, more integrated, more fully alive. So I inquire, are you prepared for this challenge? Are you willing to question the narratives you've internalized about your identity, to confront repressed aspects of yourself, to finally align with your authentic essence? If anything within this exploration has prompted reflection, consider which aspects most profoundly impacted your understanding. Have you experienced living through an identity that doesn't authentically represent your true nature? This discovery represents merely the beginning of a profound journey into self-understanding. The exploration of your authentic self continues beyond these words, inviting you to delve deeper into the hidden mechanisms shaping your consciousness and reclaim the authorship of your unique human experience. In our exploration of the authentic self, we've traversed the complex psychological landscape mapped by Carl Jung, examining the persona we present to the world, confronting the shadow that harbors our repressed qualities, and acknowledging the universal archetypes that shape our inner narratives. This journey of individuation represents not merely a philosophical exercise, but a profound invitation to reclaim the wholeness of our being. The path toward authenticity requires extraordinary courage. It demands that we question everything we've assumed about ourselves, dismantle defensive structures built over decades, and venture into uncharted psychological territories. Yet within this challenging process lies the potential for profound liberation, the opportunity to experience life with unprecedented depth, meaning, and genuine connection. Consider this. The discomfort you feel when confronting your shadow pales in comparison to the suffering of living an inauthentic existence. The initial vulnerability of removing your social mask ultimately leads to relationships of greater intimacy and truth. The confusion of questioning inherited beliefs eventually yields to the clarity of personal conviction. Individuation doesn't promise the absence of suffering. Life inevitably contains pain, but it offers something more valuable: the capacity to experience that suffering with awareness, purpose, and integration. When we embrace our complete humanity, including our contradictions and complexities, we discover resilience beyond what our fragmented selves could imagine. This journey never truly concludes. Each day presents new opportunities to choose authenticity, over conformity, conscious awareness over blind habit, integration over fragmentation. It's a lifelong practice of remembering and reclaiming what has always been within you, your essential nature, your authentic self. As you continue this journey beyond these words, remember that the greatest adventure is not found in external achievements or acquisitions, but in the courageous exploration of your own consciousness. For in discovering who you truly are, you simultaneously discover what you are truly capable of becoming. The question remains not whether you can afford to undertake this journey, but whether you can afford not to. The authentic life awaits. Take care and see you later.